How many wins would it take for the Hornets to be sellers at the trade deadline? Plus, we'll give you our bold predictions today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. There's David Walker nailing the Game Time. He's on Twitter at David B. Walker. There's Doug Branson. EveryHornetsBoxscore.com is where
I didn't even participate in the Game Time because I was trying to get some phlegm out of my throat. I was trying to take care of the audience, and I had to lay out of the Game Time.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for your generosity. That is Doug Branson. His Substack is EveryHornetsBoxscore.com. You can also subscribe to his subtext. And you said co-owner of Every Hornets Box Score is David. So you guys are in this thing together now, huh?
50-50, splitting the simoleons. And the work.
Getting filthy rich, baby. David and Doug. I'm Walker Mail. I'm not a part of EveryHornetsBoxscore.com. They left me out of it. I'm on busy. WFNZ.
Oh, listen.
I'm on WFNZ, though.
I'm an owner now. We'll fix that, Walker.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we appreciate it. WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. Find me on Twitter at Walker Mail. So we have a question, kind of a Sicko Satchel-led question. What you got, Doug?
Yeah, this is from Every Hornets Box Score, actually. Got this off the, I think, a comment or a chat.
Enough of this Every Hornets Box Score. Got it. Yeah. Every Hornets Box Score. 50-50. Every Hornets Box Score. Okay, got it.
This is from @Keef802 saying, how many... Actually, no, this was a YouTube comment. Now that I think about this, I'm sorry. I want to give proper credit here.
Of course
I think Keef is on Every Hornets Box Score, but I think this was a YouTube comment. He said, to our last episode, how many wins do the Hornets have to have at the trade deadline to make you want to use pieces to push for the playoffs versus how many to make moves to protect the draft pick? Because a lot of people, if you've been listening to sort of national media previews of the NBA, whenever they get to the Hornets, they look at the ownership group and they look at the fact that the Hornets have a lottery-protected pick, and they look at the roster and they say, well, this team could got to go one of two ways at the trade deadline. They could prepare themselves to make a run at the Cooper Flag sweepstakes and keep their lottery pick regardless, or they could try to win now and take a risk of losing that pick. And so Keith wants to know, what's the sort of win threshold for you guys? Let me give you a little bit of context here before you answer that. So I looked at the standings by date from Basketball Reference for the trade deadline last year, and the 7th, 8th spot was Miami, Orlando at 30 wins apiece. And then 9-10 was Chicago at 26 and Atlanta at 24. Orlando would move up 2 spots. Miami would move down a spot, and Chicago, Atlanta would remain your 9-10 play-in seeds. So what do you think?
Go ahead, David.
I have a number. Yeah, it was going to be 30. And it sounds like 30 would put them looking pretty good if all things remained, and maybe they try to make a move to up their chances. But like for this team to win 30 games at that point, is the over under sitting at? I know I asked you guys this last time. Do we know the latest over under?
Well, we did the ESPN NBA preview. They had them
37.
At 30. They did have 37. So probably anywhere from that 33, 37. 37 seems on the high end to me.
It does. It certainly does. So yeah, I'll say 30 because that would mean you are like firmly in the running there, I think, and it would be hard pressed to say, well, we're just going to bail out now. So I'll go with 30.
Yeah, look, maybe I'm answering this question with a tail between my legs. I do find that first round pick really valuable, especially in this draft class. I want to go to the postseason. I do. If there is a shot for us to have a playoff series here in this city, then I want to take advantage of it. With that being said, I'm probably going to go with a pretty high number, because I want to know for sure that we're going to even maybe flirt with a top 6 seed.
You want to be locked in. You want to be
locked in. So I want to be locked on, and I want to be locked in. So I might even go like
that's a pro.
I want to be 33, 35 wins. Like I want to be solidly in. And where I think the Hornets might go here, guys, let's say they're, I don't know, 27. They're pretty solidly in the 10, 9 seed or whatever. I think they just ride it out, continue to have fun, and see what happens. And I know it's not great to kind of, aimlessly wander through a playoff path. But if they don't make any moves, whether it's buying or selling, and they just let the cards fall as they may. If they get to the play-in, they lose, they get their first-round pick, great. If they get to the play-in, they win, they get a playoff series, then great. But I don't think that the Hornets would make any big-time move to distinguish where they want to go one way or the other, and that would be okay with me if that day comes.
So here's where I am. I'll just give you the raw numbers, and then I'll give you my explanation. So I think anything above 30 wins. So if you look at if I expand my standings out a little bit, at the trade or at the All-Star break, Indiana had 31 wins. They were in the 6th spot. Philadelphia had 32 wins. New York had 33 wins in the 4th and 5th spot. Anything above 30 wins, I think you have to start considering making a move, maybe a small move, doesn't have to be a gigantic move, but a move to put yourself solidly into the playoff series. Because playoff series experience, I think, would be immensely valuable. Even if you got blanked 4-0, it would be immensely valuable to LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller and your ability to evaluate which players are going to be players that can contribute for you in future playoff series and which ones aren't. So I think you have to go for it at that point. At 30 wins, I think you could solidly do nothing and just see what happens. And then...
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Right. And then, but anything south of 30, 28 to 30, I'll put the range there. Like if you're sitting in the 9th, 10th spot, I think then you really do consider, okay, let's keep that pick. Let's try to go and make, and I'll say this too. This is probably less about win total and more about evaluating what your team is, because you could have a 32 win team at the break and go, wow, we got these 32 wins because we were awesome offensively. We still haven't been able to make the transformations defensively that Charles Lee wants to make. And we're going to get smoked in a play. If we end up in the play-in 7, 8, 9, 10, it's going to be smoke trilogy. It's going to be the third part of a smokening. So like I would not want them to move forward, even if they had 31, 32 wins, if you thought, hey, we're just going to get absolutely trounced in a play-in situation.
No, and I thought about that too, like positioning, more so how does it look, and positioning maybe even rather than the wins. But the idea, right, the spirit of the question is, if things all play out similar to what they did last year, then it would have to be north of 30 and pretty solidly in for them to look to go even further and maybe make that a first round series, not winning it, but make it a 6-game series to go and get another piece or something like that. And obviously not trading away any of your top 8 guys, whatever. So that's what I would agree with you, Doug.
And the reason this conversation is actually important is because the team actually has the flexibility to do something. I mean, either way, they could get bad, or I think they have the pieces. If Miles Bridges performs well, if Vasa Micic recovers anywhere near the level of play that he had, if Trey Mann continues to elevate his game, they will have options to get better or to get worse in whatever fashion or way they need to. So that's important to understand. The thing is, we've been talking in this first segment about what we would do. We could talk about what you think the ownership would actually sign off on. They were on the Hornets Hivecast this morning. I was listening, and I don't know their I can't really distinguish their voices quite yet. Schlotkin. I don't know if it was Gabe Plotkin or Rick Schnall that said this, but when talking about where they were as a franchise, they said it's going to take a long time. You can't make a great franchise overnight. And they put themselves in the 2nd inning of a 9-inning ball game. Going to the baseball analogy for the basketball franchise.
Early.
Now,
it's real early.
Okay, it's early, but if you've watched a baseball game, the innings, sometimes they can go very quickly. And sometimes it takes forever to get from the second inning to the ninth inning. So I don't know if they did this on purpose, but I think it's actually the perfect analogy for what they have in front of them this season, which is a choice to take their time or a choice to move this thing forward quickly. And that choice, I think, is going to be so dependent on what they see out of LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams. Like if you've got 33 wins and you've got no Mark Williams for the rest of the season, then you hit the tank button because you've got no chance at defending the rim.
Yeah, I mean, some of this is ultimately, I think, going to solve for itself depending on injuries and actual win numbers. But what's going to be interesting, or what would be interesting, if they were solidly, up there or pointed in that direction or had a great run pre-All-Star break, how do they approach that team in that locker room and Charles Lee and say, well, we had a good run, guys? Like, how do they
get in?
How do they pull the plug like the Jazz did? I mean, it can be done and it's understandable. But like for this city, that team, those guys who just have not had any experience winning anything or any success, or if they've got the possibility of even having a game here in Charlotte, like that's the crazy thing.
That's a great
They have
point.
been in playing games that they just, none of them have been here, So like that's going to be interesting. I don't know that it's ultimately going to be a problem, but it'd be a nice problem to have.
Indeed, it is. And it almost kind of already is a problem in the sense that we're talking about it because they have flexibility and we could see these realistic options. We could see them decide to be sellers at the deadline, like kind of, thrift store buyers just to help them out a little bit if they feel like they're kind of for real, but they're not going to win the series, but they want some reinforcements to help it make it a 6-game series, whatever. You have some options, and I think that's what's important to note here with the Hornets going into this season. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll give you our bold predictions. I've been given a bold prediction this entire time, really. Do I give another one? Here, we'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NBA fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Again, FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Time for bold predictions. So when I hopped on with Josh Lloyd about a month ago, given the preview stuff, bold predictions was one of the prompts, and I built myself a little bit of a cushion in there. But I said, LaMelo Ball will flirt with an all-NBA season. He will put up numbers that could earn him maybe that last third-team spot like we've seen with some other offensive-centric players like Tyrese Halliburton in the past. Could we get some kind of Trae Young entry, maybe even a Kemba Walker entry when he made it? That, of course, priced him out and got Kemba Walker all the way to Boston. Is LaMelo in line to put up some of those numbers to get a top 15 spot? That's been my bold prediction that I've been working with. But maybe I'll try to think of a different one. While I try to think of a different one here, Doug, do you want to roll with your bold prediction that you have for this upcoming season?
I'm going to go with the young phenom, Brandon Miller. My bold prediction is that Brandon Miller, backs into the All-Star game on an injury replacement courtesy of, I don't know, is it Adam Silver?
Who's getting hurt? I thought you were going to predict that.
I don't know.
That.
I'm not going to make that call.
Take it all the way home.
But my reasoning for this is that he scored 17 points per game as a rookie. People took notice of that. I think a lot of folks will say the thing that is like he could have been Rookie of the Year had it not been for the fact that he was up against two aliens in Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren. So I think he has the respect of, I think also has the respect of NBA coaches too. They understand how hard he works and how smart he is and where he's going. So I think he's got that in his favor. He's going to be able to score a lot more this year and a lot more efficiently because they've got a plan for him to shoot more threes, get to the rim more. So I expect the points per game to be north of 20 points per game. So it's all going to come down to how well is he playing defensively and how much is he able to contribute in terms of rebounds, assists, some other counting stats that can boost him. But also the final thing is the forward crop in the Eastern Conference is good, like up at the top. Obviously, you've got Giannis, you've got Tatum, you've got Brown. But behind that, like Randall exits for the Western Conference, you've got a lot of guys that are older, could be injured, could be the guys that Brandon is replacing. So I give him and Mikal Bridges doesn't look like he can shoot anymore. Changed his shot for New York. I don't know what's going on there.
This is the Devin Vassell effect. Everybody got so scared. Devin Vassell changed his shot for him before the draft. Now Mikal Bridges, midway through his career, is changing it. Hopefully they're just messing around. Hopefully,
I don't know, but my point is, like, the forward crop behind the top guys is not super solid. So I think Brandon could do it.
I'm going to tell you who he's going to replace right now. His idol. He's
going to be
a Paul George replacement
PG.
Right there. They'll just say, look, let's just swap him in. He's the new Paul George. Nobody even know the difference.
Goat for a goat.
Yeah, that's right. I got one. I got a bold. It feels bold. It sounds really bold. But I think the Hornets are going to be playing in Vegas, guys. I think they're going to do enough.
Oh, that's spicy.
I think they're going to do enough in the in-season tournament here. And let me tell you why. Their two toughest matchups are at home. One being the New York Knicks on a Friday night, I think, and the other being on the first half of back-to-back. Now, that's key. The Philadelphia 76ers and the aforementioned Paul George. Does Embiid play? Does he not play? We don't know. Can they steal those two at home and figure out a way? I guess I don't know how many it takes to get another one, maybe two. They start off in Orlando. That'll be a tough one. But then they have Brooklyn. They have the Nets. They don't want to win. The Nets don't want to win. They're just going to let Cam Thomas shoot 40 to 50 times a game and have fun with that. So I think the Hornets have a chance to be sneaky. I also think this is their shot to have some playoff experience. We were talking about it earlier. How much do they really want to get into the playoffs? How much do they want to keep that pick? If they can get these guys a feel for some competitive games, some one-and-done type situation games for this roster, I think they'll be good. So I'm thinking they're going to put a lot of emphasis on that early season tournament. Hopefully they'll be healthy, and that's my bold prediction. Playing in Vegas. Roll the dice.
You're not going to go wrong betting on Charles Lee to be competitive about something that may not be as meaningful as an NBA championship. Also,
right.
If you look at the FanDuel odds for NBA Cup winner, there are a lot of teams with last place odds at plus 25,000. Wizards, Jazz, Pistons, Blazers, Nets, Bulls, Raptors. Right above that is the Hornets at plus 21,000. So they sit in a group just above that. And then if you look at their group, they have better odds than Brooklyn at winning out of that group.
I would hope so, yeah.
Okay, I mean, here's a bold one. This one's really bold, perhaps too bold. But I will tell you, Charles Lee wins Coach of the Year.
I like that.
So if you look at the list of Coach of the Years, Mark Daigneault won it with 57 wins last year. OKC, one of the best regular season teams. There is some history of just giving this award to a monster team in the regular season, or, of course, what often happens throughout all sports is you give the award to a team that had the least amount of expectations going into the season, and then the team that outperforms them the most. So Mike Brown won with Sacramento, 48 wins in 2023. They get to the playoffs. Monty Williams wins 64 wins with Phoenix. But then Tom Thibodeau, he's got 41 wins, and he won it in 2021. Maybe that's the range, right? New York Knicks, unexpected. They get to 40 victories, and maybe the Hornets are around there where they finish above 500 or around 500, especially if you have 37 wins as the projection for ESPN. You have the over-under just a tick under that. Let's say you get 10 wins past expected. You get to a playoff series. I think getting to a playoff series with the Hornets as a first-year coach, probably putting up some pretty significant offensive numbers and improving quite a bit defensively, if that's the area you're talking about the Hornets finishing. I think Charles Lee will get enough love, especially when you look at some of these other teams. Who are the other franchises that could outperform expectations the most? Now, I get it, right? Asking this question kind of defeats the purpose because nobody thinks these teams are going to win. But it is hard for me to believe that there is a wider range of variance compared to what the Hornets have here with some of these other teams that you talk about. I really don't know where that team exists. If you go to the East, well, you got your top 5 teams last year: Celtics, Knicks, Bucks, Cavs, Magic, Pacers. Those are your top 6. 76ers, I don't see Nick Nurse getting Coach of the Year with a couple of all-NBA players perennially. I don't think the Heat are going to have a monster season, but Spo's always a threat. Maybe there's some voter fatigue with how good Spo is. Chicago is going to be a bad team. Atlanta, Quinn Snyder with Atlanta, maybe, but
No.
Quinn Snyder, you know what I'm
Atlanta
saying?
has no idea what
Right,
they're doing.
Right.
Yeah,
And then you
no
go
chance.
out to the West, where the West is going to be a dogfight. I mean, Ime Udoka, Houston finished 500 last year. I think that this is the squad that has the widest, the biggest variance here. And if they hit the high end of their outcomes, Charles Lee is going to get a lot of love for it. It would be a nice futures bet. Go to FanDuel. It'd be a nice futures bet. Big payout.
I'll see if I can get any odds on that in just a second. I think you're right. If the Charlotte Hornets make a legitimate playoff series, if they're a 6th seed, there's just no question in my mind.
Yeah.
You take a team that has been out of the playoffs since 2015-16, you put them into the playoffs, you got to give – it would be robbery not to give Coach of the Year to Charles Lee. The one candidate that I think is actually the strongest argument to take it away from Lee would be out west, and that's Bud in Phoenix. Yeah, if Phoenix is like a 1 or 2 seed, because there's already talks about how that offense looks completely transformed. If they figure all that out, I think Bud could get it. Phoenix.
And the argument would be he did a lot with stars. Charles Lee did a lot with a franchise that has not made the playoffs in a decade.
Playoffs?
So that's right. All right, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Have some final moves to get to and just really a rapid fire segment. We got some news all around the Hornets to get to here in the last segment. It's all still to come here on LOH. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts and all that stuff? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them, because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, got some final moves to update everyone on. The Charlotte Hornets, they added somebody to the roster yesterday. The Hornets president of basketball ops, Jeff Peterson, announced that the team had claimed guard Jared Rhoden off waivers and converted him into a two-way contract. Rhoden appeared in 17 games with the Pistons last season. He recorded 4.9 points on 50% shooting, 38.7% shooting from three. He had almost 2 rebounds in just over 14 minutes per outing. He suited up for 31 games with the Pistons across 2 NBA seasons, and his averages basically are about the same as what I just mentioned. So Jared Rhoden, he's on the team. Remember, they cut Keontae Johnson, so Jared Rhoden, he actually takes over that two-way spot, and maybe the two-way spots are now set going into the season. Any thoughts on Jared Rhoden here, Doug?
I went to the expert on the Locked On Raptors podcast, Sean Woodley, and I said, can you give me any intel on Jared Rhoden? Hornets picked him up, and he replied, I really cannot, haha.
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
right.
Yeah,
but that's how little he played for the Raptors. But so I did some research, 3-and-D archetype for sure. Out of college, there were some questions about his consistency in terms of outside shooting. He seems to have answered those questions. Like if you look at his G League shooting percentages from three, he didn't take a lot of them, but I think they were, certainly north of 39%. So maybe he's answered some of those questions, and the Hornets want to give him a look in Greensboro for the final two-way slot.
He must have a motor. That's all I'm going to say. He must be a guy that gets after, because that's all they're bringing in these days, guys. Anyone who just doesn't run full speed all the time is not going to get any looks here. So welcome.
Yeah, I was looking at some college stats. He was a good rebounder for a guard, and the shooting wasn't great, but he got to the free throw line a little bit, shot above 80%, and also was a good rebounder. So I guess that would indicate the motor. Just, two-way spot, it's not entirely nothing. It would be different if it wasn't a two-way contract. It was one of these E10s, or you have no clue if he's going to be on the roster. They claimed him, which means that they value him enough to put in a claim, and he's on what is like a legitimate roster spot. I mean, you take up one of those 2 ways. I think that's real. So, not nothing here for Jared Rhoden. You're right, David.
Okay,
Welcome.
so the 3-point percentage was 38.8% in 23-24 for the Motor City Cruise, and then 37.4%.
That's a great name. That's a good G League
Motor
name.
City
Fantastic.
Cruise,
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Anyway, but the shooting seems to have corrected itself a little bit.
Okay. What else did you want to get to here, Doug? I know you had something else before we get to FanDuel.
Well, so if you've been paying attention to the NBA at all, yesterday it was transaction city for a lot of these guys that have been drafted in the past couple of years. They were up for extensions, and some big numbers being thrown out for Jalen Green, for Şengün. Who else got paid? Suggs got paid. Gordon got paid. And now you notice the Hornets weren't in any of these conversations because their 2021 draft picks didn't exactly work out. Although shouts to Kai Jones for making it with the Clippers, man. He's on the team. So that's
there
awesome.
We go.
But the Hornets didn't have to do their own draft picks, but they did via the trade deadline last season acquire Trey Mann, who was also selected outside of the lottery in that same draft. But they decided, both parties, I guess, decided not to pursue an extension. Does that make sense for both parties at this point, David?
I think it falls in line with kind of their approach to the season as a whole in this group. I mean, no need to push anything now. He's had a great preseason.
Yep.
Last year was, not that he played poorly, but it's a toss-up as to what kind of player he can actually be. So maybe it gives them a little more flexibility too at the trade deadline, I guess, if you're going to move a guy that's not locked up. I guess it depends on how you look at it. But I think it falls in line. Like they've got their core. He's got his chance to kind of prove that he may be able to be a part of that moving forward. But I don't think just off of preseason they're going to make a big commitment.
And that's what it ultimately comes down to, because I think you saw a lot of good basketball from Trey Mann last year. It wouldn't be entirely true to say that it was just off preseason, but the preseason certainly ramped up the interest in Trey Mann, and that would probably be the catalyst for trying to lock him in as soon as possible. I go back to a guy like Devontae Graham, where I was wrong when I said I wanted to extend him. I thought losing him would really hurt the team's offense after that, and now he's been bouncing around, and it was just
good news.
Only good for the Hornets, right? It was only good for the Hornets, and Mitch Kupchak was able to flip him for a first-round pick, which was absolutely something. It was
that they didn't use. Could have been Jalen Duren.
That's true. That is true. Either way, I don't think you have to chase good contracts in their current situation like I felt like they did the previous time. If you go back to the Devontae Graham situation, I was wanting to get out in front of, hey, here's somebody that was a most improved player of the year candidate. You had all of these players like Luka and these stars saying Devontae should win. If he's not going to cost a lot of money because people just don't feel so good about him yet, well, let's give him a good contract. Let's give him a cheaper deal and then reap the benefits while he starts to blossom into what is like a really start-worthy guard in the NBA. I don't think you have to chase so desperately those good contracts where you're just kind of crossing your fingers, giving Trey Mann a nice contract, hoping that he lives up to it after what he did in preseason and even last year, even though I think it would have been worthwhile to explore it. I'm sure they did explore it. But this makes sense from a Trey Mann standpoint. Let's wait and see. Going to try to parlay this into a big deal. And it makes sense for the Hornets. Let's not pay you based off of what we saw last half season and also in just the preseason. I would like to lock him in, but it makes sense for both sides, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're Trey Mann, it's a risk because if you're injured for the entire year, you still would, I think, have the Hornets' interest in restricted free agency, but it would come at probably a reduced cost. But if you have a huge year, which he looks, again, preseason, looks like he's due for a huge year, then, you could get paid a lot more in restricted free agency. So from the Hornets' perspective, you're getting Trey Mann on a contract year. That's only going to help your team play better. You are getting restricted free agency, so you'll have the advantage to sign him when that time comes. And you get to keep your own books clean for now. And because he's on a restricted free agency coming up, I think it's going to be immensely more tradable if Trey Mann does perform such and you want to move off and acquire more draft capital, you will have that option with Trey Mann. Whereas if you would have signed him to like a 3-year deal, it wouldn't have made it like incredibly difficult depending on what the number was. It wasn't going to be 5 for $150, what some of these guys were getting. It would still been tradable, but now it's immensely more tradable.
Yeah, it just seems like somebody could like take a leap, and figure it out for themselves. If he was going to come into like some playoff team, make a push, and even if they just wanted to add him to their roster, it seems like that would be more appealing as versus committing long term to somebody that they may not want to.
And as a team, the Hornets don't know what they have or don't have in a lot of these guys. That's what this season is going to be about. And it just makes no sense to lock anyone in at this point until you're sure about, because it maybe there's a significant weakness that they identify in the team that they need to address, and moving Trey Mann could help address that need. And so you just want to keep all of your options open at this point. There's just no reason to do that.
Yeah, go get paid this year, Trey. That'd be fun for everybody involved. Go get paid, go fill it up, be it the leader of the bucket brigade, pay man, Trey man, six man, all of it. I can't wait.
Trey I. Shout out Rod. That was the best one.
Yeah, Trey I, absolutely. Okay, we have one more bit of news to get to. Did not get to it, but this dropped, I believe, on Monday and or Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. But Bally is rebranding, everyone.
Huge.
So, yeah. You will see the latest development in the Diamond Sports bankruptcy on Tuesday is that FanDuel, was it Monday, Tuesday? Either way, FanDuel Sports Network broadcast now what is going to turn into, Bally is rebranding to FanDuel. I've got this all messed up.
You got it.
Sorry.
You got it.
Bally is rebranding to FanDuel. Don't know if anything's going to change. It just looks like basically they are renaming what the channel is going to be. Apologize for the confusion with the funky write-up.
Well, I'll tell you that nothing's going to change. They're still going to broadcast 80 games, and then there are 2 games that are like national TV flex or NBA TV, whatever. But so 80 games, and it's going. The app is going to change over from the Bally brand to the FanDuel.
It's changed. I can confirm.
It's already changed. Great. This is naming rights. So don't get your hopes up that anything in terms of the tech is going to change or the consistency or the availability. This is a lifeline to a company in Diamond Sports that desperately needed a lifeline. I guess they're still working things out with Amazon. The future is still very murky. If I were the Hornets, well, I don't even need to say if I were the Hornets. We've already got confirmation from team president Shelly Kayat-Weston that they will explore local TV broadcast in the future. And so that's my recommendation is go as much as you can, explore all alternatives to get off of this diamond ship with some fancy new branding, which by the way, love the branding. FanDuel, we love it.
We love FanDuel.
Fantastic. Yeah. This is such an hilarious state of just where we are. Like, the logo, your icon just changes, it's now FanDuel. When you go inside, it's the exact same. Exact same horrible interface. I swear to God, if they please just one thing, just do a new no commercial break in progress, screensaver, if you will, the hockey, the dribbling of the basketball. If we could just shake that up just a little bit.
It's that sound effect over and over.
David, you are speaking straight to my girlfriend can't stand it. We have to mute it every single time that a commercial hops on because one, it's either going to be just a million different Wingstop commercials. It's going to be here, the Bojangles. We're going to hear that constantly. Oh my God!
I will say, somehow they're the only outlet that has no political ads. So good on them for that.
That's true.
It's not that, but I mean, it's a toss up right now. Which one's more annoying?
No, you're right. It's a great would you rather. It is a great one. Would you rather hear all of the political ads that come with every other channel you watch, or would you rather hear Wingstop, Bojangles, and then skating / dribbling all the time? Which one? I don't know.
How come they don't have a baseball one, like the crack of the bat or something? Or
weird because they cover a lot of baseball teams. Although that's a lot more baseball teams have jumped off the Bally's bandwagon than the NBA teams that need the cash. So I will say that I think the rebrand is honestly a good thing because Bally will now be held accountable for some of those tech issues. Like if I'm FanDuel and you can't get the games on the air that I'm advertising now for, that's going to be a problem. So hopefully there's some added pressure to get this thing right.
They're just going to kick you down the hall to the Bally's guy. They left one guy in the office. He's going to be responsible for answering phones for 3 hours a day. And once the game's tip, he's going to head on home.
I feel like people will get less mad clicking on that icon, though. You won't be seeing red anymore. Literally, you'll just be okay. FanDuel, this is happy. This isn't nearly as aggravating as much. Now, I don't know if the product is going to allow you to feel all those good feelings as you watch the game, but at least clicking on the icon, you won't get nearly as mad.
Well, it's interesting. I think this was like the big idea for Bally's. Like, I think the grand idea would be like you go in that app, you can watch the game and bet on something.
I
like
thought
at the
they
same
were
time
betting. Don't they have
the
casinos or something? Like,
yeah. I don't know if you noticed, Doug, they're not good with money. So they have some. They want to get more. That's where we come in.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get it. And they failed. Well, I guess they didn't fail. We gave it to them anyway.
All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your pods. And that does include YouTube, where you continue to subscribe. And we have jumped up quite a bit with the start of the season. Coming up not only soon, it's coming up tomorrow. We got a game to talk about tomorrow as the Hornets take on the Rockets. We'll be there to preview it all. And plus, in tomorrow's episode, we'll go over some individual profiles, start to discuss what we think of LaMelo, Brandon.
One thing we learned about
Yeah.
each player in the preseason. You won't want to miss it. Also, subscribe to the newsletter. Locked On Hornets has a free, always free newsletter. It recaps the show, writing from Katie Heindel and Mike Schreerer of Basketball Poetry and Josh Lloyd of Fantasy Basketball. The first one went out yesterday. Go to lockedondaily.com and sign up for free.
And also, we have some other business moves. David just invested in Every Hornets Boxscore. So 50-50.
Yeah,
50-50. Right down the middle, guys. Right down the middle.
We need something for, like we have for Schlotkin. We need something for you guys as well. The owners, just combining both of them for everyhornetsboxscore.com. There you can not only subscribe to read David and Doug's write-ups, but you can also text Doug. His subtext information is there. And I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
Shh, shh, shh.